Welcome. Today we're talking about winning strategies for family caregiving. Darra Wray is my cohort in presenting this program today, and we have sponsors. So first along, before we get to that part, we're going to talk about Learn. Lifelong Education and Aging Resource Network is an Idaho-based nonprofit organization with the mission to provide quality community education on retirement and age-related topics in the area of health, wealth, lifestyle, and caregiving. And Learn is a leaders network of the Society of Certified Senior Advisors. So today, the content is provided for general informational purposes only and is not to be considered legal, financial, or health advice. So please consult with your professionals and other service providers before taking action based on this information today. So today, our sponsors are Oasis Senior Advisors and Red Pheasant Realty, and they make this training available to all of you free by sponsoring these programs. So they're excellent services that are available in the community. The Red Pheasant Realty realtors are CSA certified senior advisors as well. And so they have a specialty in selling and working with older folks. It's not a CSA.
It's an SRES.
It's SRES. Thank you.
It's a senior real estate specialist designation.
And Oasis Senior Advisors assist people with finding the right place to live at the right time. And today, our presenters are Darra Wray
and Dee Childers.
And it's the show.
All right. Oh, we'll thank ourselves later.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that, let's switch here.
So Darra and I thought that we would introduce ourselves since we don't have a separate host to introduce us. So we're just going to do it ourselves. Yeah. So I'm Dee Childers with Life Changes Elder Care Consulting. And I am one of the original founding members of Learn, along with Darra, our president. And we both work in the senior field in different ways. So I'm a care manager and just feel that this is such an important topic and such an important experience in our lives that most of us have, that it requires some expertise and some guidance along the way. And so that's what my company does. We provide that kind of support and guidance for family caregivers.
And I am a certified senior advisor and owner of My Care Companions and founder of Learn. And as in my role with My Care Companions, I help families streamline and simplify the business of life, particularly working with oftentimes sandwich generation caregivers, those children, adult children beginning to engage with their parents in helping them manage legal, financial, household, healthcare, pulling all of that information together so that when they work with their service providers like Dee, they have the best information in the right place and at the right time, because we know that having the right information in the right place and at the right time can save you time, money, and could even save your life.
And a lot of stress and grief, because not having it causes a great deal of anxiety. So it's an amazing tool. And I encourage you all to check out the tool at some point in time. It's available.
Thanks, Dee.
Yes.
Yeah. But really, most importantly, and while we introduce ourselves professionally, really we find it very important to share that we ourselves have been family caregivers. And in my case, I consider myself the accidental caregiver because I didn't know any different. And my family caregiving started when I was 10 years old and my mother became disabled. And I needed to help manage some of the family activities and responsibilities. I didn't know any different. And over my lifespan, have ended up doing active family caregiving, not just for my own children and my husband, but for extended family members, for more than 10 different family members, different circumstances.
And I started my journey about 12 years ago at this point in time, when I got a little letter in the mail from my dad's long-term care insurance policy that said, oh, you're the third-party notifiee that he hasn't paid his long-term insurance bill. And of course, there was a little bit of panic in my voice, but it became increasingly more panicked and stressed when I called him and figured out that he could no longer figure out how to get online and pay a bill. Dad was always very computer literate, and that was very much unlike him. And that began a journey of becoming his caregiver, having to go to court and become a family or an appointed guardian and conservator for his estate and for his health and well-being, and just realize that this whole process is a quagmire, and none of us are prepared for it unless we've been doing caregiving all the way along the line, or we happen to be in a family that's part of what we do. But we're no longer living in an environment in America where we grow up with grandma in the same house or other senior relatives and learning how to take care of them and what is all entailed. And so figuring it out was a struggle for me and took a long time. And I decided that this was really important to help others figure this journey out. Yeah. And Darra and I collided at some point in time, and we just share so much in common. So we have a lot of fun doing the things that we do together, and putting this game together was a highlight.
It is a highlight, and we enjoy sharing it with you. So we'd love to start off with a poll just to get an idea of who we're talking to today. And let's see. Can you see the poll out there? Can someone confirm? Yes or no?
Yes, we can see it.
If you could just respond to that poll so we can see who is with us today and what role you're playing. And we've got a family caregiver.
And when we talk about advisor could be an attorney, a financial advisor, CPA, some other person along that line.
Oh, good. Well, I'm thrilled that we've got 3 family caregivers here with us today, and we are going to ask you to join us a little bit and encourage you. Along the way, we may ask you to participate and share some information in chat. We may ask a question, ask for some feedback. Totally your choice. It's not required, but if you don't put it in there, we're going to make it up and have some really good fun along the way. So we have all kinds of questions that we will want to ask you as we go.
Great.
All right.
And it is more fun if you play a game.
So we're going to go ahead and play the game. What do you think, Dee?
Yes, let's do that.
All right. Okay, we've got a care professional, several family caregivers, and some miscellaneous people out there. So we're glad you're here today. Thank you for joining us. And I think we can just close this. Yes?
I think we so. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Shall we go ahead?
Yes, let's do that. So we're going to talk about rules of the game. Darra.
All right. Let me click over here. So we're going to play the winning strategies for family caregiving today. And the goal of this family caregiving game is to finish with the best quality of life possible and with your family relationships and resources intact. That's the goal of every family caregiving game, if we consider it a game. So how do you do that? The 2 most important rules of the game. The first one we learned in kindergarten, it's just to play nice on the playground. And sometimes in times of stress, it's really hard and it's easy to forget that everybody is trying to do the right thing. So playing nice on the playground and remembering kindergarten rules. So that's the first rule. And the second rule is to avoid family demons. And they do rear their ugly little heads. And the ones we most commonly hear about and encounter are jealousy and greed and resentment. But I would love for anyone who has encountered another demon that they might consider to add that into the chat. And we'll monitor the chat and share some of those demons as well. If there are other demons that you think rear their head here, family demons. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on while you think about that. Denial, that's a good one. Yes.
That's a really strong one.
Denial, that would be the little devil with his head in the ground, right? That would be the one we would need to look at. So denial is a big one. So as you play the game, here are the rules that we're going to play by today. So there's 3 important steps as you play the family caregiving game. 1, you have to make sure you have chosen the right team and put them in the right positions. You need to develop your game plan and continuously monitor and manage it. And then finally, you have to keep track and you have to make sure you're always monitoring what's going on, who's doing what, and where you stand in the progress of your game. So Dee's going to talk about choosing your team.
So most people really feel constrained about the idea of building a team, like, well, there's not really a lot of people that I feel comfortable with that I know want to be involved. People say they do, but maybe they don't really want to. And what we want you to do is to broaden your horizon today. So there's no shoulds about being part of the team. They don't have to be related. They don't have to be your next door neighbor. They don't have to be a medical professional. What we want to know is people, what you're looking for is people that want to participate and will show up and do their part. So we want to select a team manager as well. And I love this with one of my clients, Harold, that he always said to his family, I'm the team owner, she's the team captain, and you will do what she says or you won't be on the team. So figuring out who's going to play each of those roles. So often, the team owner is the person needing care, and they may or may not be able to contribute to what the team is doing and how things move forward, depending on what their capacity is. And along that line, you want to make sure your team members have the capacity to take on some extra help or extra work to be part of your team, that they're not constrained by work excessively, family obligations, they have to be able to contribute whatever part they commit to. And you want to know, kind of assess what their talents are. There are people who are far more technically competent on the computer than others. Some that are really good about details and asking great questions and taking good notes. So you want to think about what their talents, capabilities, their availability, and their motivation is before you invite them to your team. And professionals and advisors can be added as needed. And one of the things that I think is a really helpful tool is this next photo, this next image right here, because we get really lost in this inner circle here. When if you look at the innermost circle there, thank you. I was going to point with my finger and I know that doesn't work, Darra, is that's you and your closest family or friends. And that's your inner circle. That's the people that probably everybody just assumes that are going to be on your team. And so writing down their names in this area over here and keeping them very present is really helpful. And then move on as you get those names all listed, is expand out to the next ring of your team, potential team members. And they could be other family members, other friends. There's lots of other folks that might fit into other. They could be folks from church. They could be folks from class. They could be folks from other connections that you have in the community, your book club group, etc. The next ring out there are really the medical professionals. So you have your physicians, you might have a primary care physician. Hopefully you all have a primary care physician, a PCP. And then, whatever the specialties are that your individual that you're caring for might need. So it could be cardiologist, a nephrologist, other folks along that line, as well as the non-medical professionals. So there's kind of this bridge in between the medical and the non-medical. So home health would be a medical team, but home care, if you were using outside services, would be non-medical professionals. So the professional caregivers. And then the outside ring are additional resources. So again, to keep in mind, who are the other advisors that are in your life? And write their names down, because they are great resources for you as well. So your financial advisor, your attorney, your tax attorney, or your tax preparer, those are folks that have other connections to other resources, and they want to help as well. So put this together and work on it. Make it a working document, because people will come on and people may come off based on their availability. So developing your game plan.
So once you have created your team, you want to develop your game plan. And there are some key steps in this, and Dee's going to do a deep dive for us on how to complete a needs assessment. But you do need to really understand what is needed, what kind of support is needed, what is reasonable to provide, and how would you do that. Then looking at your team, determine how responsibilities will be divided or shared. Importantly, really importantly, align on a communication plan, including frequency and who is going to lead the communication, what are the topics, what level of detail, just so it's very clear. Sometimes just setting expectations correctly really helps you avoid conflict, and have that conversation up front around how to communicate.
And the how you communicate is important. And so
Yes.
that could be, is it okay? Does everybody email? Might work great. Does everybody text? Maybe 3 or 4 people don't text. So you
Yeah.
want to think about what's the primary medium to keep everybody connected. And there is an app. We didn't talk about this last time, but WhatsApp is a really nice app if everybody's app proficient. That is an encrypted app. So it's like you can text with WhatsApp, where when you text with just your phone, there's some encryption, but not a lot. So just be cautious of that and just be aware.
And really, your communication plan can be multi-layered. Some people might communicate by text quickly daily, a weekly email update, and maybe, a phone call with one person who really doesn't do any of those things. And then Dee will talk about that needs assessment in the care plan. But once you have your needs assessment, you build that care plan and you reevaluate it regularly. So tell us about developing the game plan, Dee.
Yes, thank you, Darra. So these are words that you're going to hear a lot in your caregiving journey, and that's ADLs, or activities of daily living. And these are really core activities that we all do to some degree. And what happens as we need care, that our ability to do these very basic things like bathing, dressing, feeding, grooming, being able to ambulate and go up and down stairs, to use the toilet on their own, and that they have continence, that they're able to control their bladder and bowel. Those are all ADLs, activities of daily living. And to evaluate where the person that you're caring for is with each of these is a core piece of a care plan. I mean, this is just right up front, bottom line, do they need help bathing? And so that's then, if bathing is a place that they need help with, you'll see at the bottom of this page, area that are needing help with. The goal is to make sure that they get a bath 2 times a week or 4 times a week or whatever it may be. And what is the specific action item? And that could be getting into the bathtub. It could be a bed bath. So you want to know specifically how they're going to go about doing it. What's the action item and what's the expected outcome, as well as who it's going to be assigned to. And then we get some update on that. So ADLs, and then independent activities of daily living are the secondary level of things that we all do at some level at some point in time. And that's the ability to use the telephone, ability to go shopping. And it doesn't matter whether they're physically going to the store. Can they get online and order their groceries or whatever they might need? But are they able to take care of the shopping activity themselves? Food preparation, similarly, housekeeping, laundry, transportation. Medication management is a really big one, another big one, that they understand what they're taking, how they're taking it, when they're taking it, and why they're taking it. And we'll talk about the medication list down the road, but that they know and you trust them to take the right medications every day the way they're taken. And then of course, the way they should be taken. And then of course, finances. And this is kind of one of the areas we often see go more quickly than some of the others, because they're unable to manage numbers in their head. Bills might not be getting paid, utilities turned off, that kind of thing.
It's actually one of the first ones you might spot in the form of a late notice, an email like Dee received about her dad not paying a bill. But the ones to really watch are the condition of the refrigerator, the status of the mail. These are places to keep an eye out for. So Dee, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about how the ADLs are used in care later. What are their criteria, and how do you think about ADLs when it comes to assisted living?
Well, thank you, Darra. That's an excellent question. This is a big area that they're going to be assessing when someone is looking to move into a senior community, is how much help or care do they need in each of these areas. So literally, they're assessing, do they need no assistance, some assistance, standby assistance, 1-person assistance, or 2-person assistance. So each of those kind of, if they're doing a point system, adds more points. Which will also affect the cost of care in senior care. So when you look at a base rate, you're looking at room and board essentially. What's it cost to just live there? And the care is a charge that's on top of that. And that all comes about by assessing the activities of daily living. Doctors are looking at that when they're looking at capacity and need for help at home. Attorneys, when we look at whether long-term care insurances are going to kick in, 90% of the time they're looking for an activity of daily living that the individual is unable to perform on their own. And more of them just requires more care. Memory care dementia is the one area, my father he could do all of his ADLs right up to about 2 months before he passed. He was doing all of those kinds of things, but he qualified for his long-term care, and he was needed to be in a care facility because of his dementia.
So that's really the key that I wanted to focus on, is those ADLs become the elements that are really reviewed by those legal, financial, care, location professionals to help you assess level of care. And when you get into care, most of the IADLs are taken care of.
Right, absolutely.
So then, now that you've got the rules of the game, you've chosen your team, you've developed your game plan, you've got a care plan, and you understand your IADLs, need to keep track. And what do we mean by that? This is where we start thinking about the caregiver. And it's very important for you to keep track of, monitor and balance the individual impacts of caregiving on the individuals in your team. How much effort, how many hours, what's the impact on their life, on their family? And it's never going to be equal. It's just not. But understanding that impact and having an open dialogue as a family about that impact and what you can do to help manage it together. One important element of that is keeping track of the economic impact of the caregiving. So if one adult child has stepped forward to take on the majority of the care, and in so doing left their job or took a part-time job, we really encourage the family to think about what has been the economic, not just short-term impact of that choice, but the long-term impact to that family member on their own Social Security contributions and their own retirement and things like that. And begin to think, are agreements needed to balance those economic impacts? And sometimes those agreements come in the form of pay at time of effort, or for some of the effort. Sometimes they come in the form of an agreement for a different distribution of an estate at the end of life. There's all kinds of ways you can think through this. The important conversation is to acknowledge it and to have conversations about it so that you don't get blindsided with resentment and misunderstanding. And then on a daily basis, not just on this very big basis, rewarding and recognizing the caregivers for their efforts and understanding the toll it takes and making sure they have respite. And those caregivers that are on the front line every day, that you're checking in with them, not just on how the person they're caring for is doing, but how they're doing.
Super important piece right there. And I think it's too often easy to overlook that, or the caregivers themselves say, oh, don't worry about it, I'm fine. But the reality of it is that we can only be fine for so long with a constant stream of caregiving, and then we need a break, preferably before we break. And it's not uncommon for caregivers to pass, family caregivers to pass before the person they're caring for. So making sure we take care of the caregivers is really important as well.
All right, so we've reviewed the rules, and now we're going to play a game. Okay, so today in our caregiving game, we've only got time for hopefully most of these 3 categories. We'll go till about 5 o'clock and see how far we get. But we're going to play harsh reality, talk the talk, and family dynamics are our categories. And we have four questions in each category, actually 4 family games. So we're playing family game night, Dee. Pick a card.
Okay, here we go. Oh, solitaire.
We're going to play solitaire in Talk the Talk.
Don't try to do it all alone. So we want to be sure that when we're taking care of someone, that we want to include the care recipient. All too often they feel like people are doing things to them versus for them. And that's not really a good place to be. So it's as much as possible is to include them. And yes, we understand they minimize and they might kind of go off on some tangents, but as much as possible, allow them an opportunity to provide input where they're able to. And then we've talked about building a support network. And we kind of went over this with the circles a little bit ago about looking at who are the closest. What's the extended network? Friends and neighbors are wonderful resources. And as long as they know what's going on and that some help may be needed, or could they be available on standby, most people are willing to help. And I think neighbors are a really important one to get connected with when you have a first alert for your loved one, because often having somebody that's like literally next door to the person who is the care recipient to just check and see, did they have a fall? Do they need emergency services? Or did they just accidentally hit the button and everything is okay? So neighbors are a great one to be able to utilize for that. That saves the professionals and the paramedics and you having to come running from the other side of town. But we've talked about professionals, and those include all areas of life, the professionals. It could include a masseuse. Massage is really a very helpful thing when we're both giving care and receiving care, that there's stress involved with that. So taking care of our psyches is very important as well. And then service organizations. There's a variety of organizations that are out there to help navigate this quagmire of skills and services that are available and needed, and they do change. You know, I was telling Darra the other day, I did a pretty extensive survey on transportation services in the Valley, and really there's only one of those companies 5 years later that's still in business. So that the landscape changes periodically. So you need to pay attention to who's coming and who's going. And then share responsibilities. You know, caregiving is a really huge load. And to think you're going to shoulder it all alone the whole time is just not realistic. And besides, you're going to get really worn out. And you want to be sure that you're recognizing those signs of caregiver burnout. I remember one day I went shopping for my dad. He was in assisted living, and I'd been out shopping for him because we moved him from out of state, and I bought new clothes and I bought things that would be helpful in the assisted living. And I was pretty tired when I walked in that night, and I walked in and put him on the bed. And I said, Dad, I've been out shopping for you all day. And he said, oh, okay, just put him over there on the bed. And I said, don't you want to look at him? And he said, no. And I said, well, okay. And I just said, I guess I'll see you later. And I went stomping out into the hall. And I stopped myself and I went, oh, you're pretty tired. And that was a real mature reaction there, Dee. So I went back in the room and I just said, Daddy, I love you very much. And I'll look forward to showing you what I bought you another time. So enjoy your evening. But we don't always catch ourselves like that. It's important if you try to. And what I realized is I was tired. I was burnt out. That was not the time to have that kind of conversation with my dad. So self-awareness is super important. And then to do something to take care of yourself about that.
So we don't want you to play solitaire. We want to make sure you are taking care of yourself. So a question for those of you out there who are family caregivers now or in the past, if you would add into the chat, maybe one thing you are doing or have done to take care of yourself as a caregiver. Would love to see what ideas come forward if any of you have ideas to share using the chat. All right, I'm going to return to the main board. Hopefully we'll see some of those ideas come in. All right, Dee, while we're seeing there, why don't you go ahead and pull another card?
Okay. Come on, you guys. I know you're doing things to take care of yourself. Could be a glass of wine. We don't care. We're not judgmental here. This is not judgment.
All right, maybe we'll just, if we don't have a group that really wants to enter in chat. Oh, there we've got a few. Hot bath. There we go.
Nice.
I like these. A vacation and actually got away and let other people take care while you were gone. Congratulations. That's hard to do.
Yes, it is.
And spending time with dear friends and wine. Yes, yes. All right. I love it. And taking a nice walk from the grand vacation to the walk, right? That's exactly where we need to be. So great inputs. Thank you. Keep them coming as we ask you questions. All right. The next game we're going to play is hide and seek. And this is family dynamics. And this is, we've already talked a little bit about this already. family contributions are not always equal, and they're just not going to be. So this is again, acknowledging that it's actually easy to resent that family member who's far away. It's easy for them to play ostrich, out of sight, out of mind. And the reality is distance and circumstance actually do make it more challenging for someone far away to participate. But as you're putting together your care plan and your care team, making sure you identify who can and will help and focus on individual strengths, but then get creative and figure out how that person who's far away, who can't manage medication and can't manage doctor's appointments and can't do those things, maybe they can handle the weekly grocery shopping and order all the groceries and have them delivered. Maybe they can make sure that, you know, the clothing and the household needs are taken care of. I'm telling you, Amazon is an amazing resource. And, you know, I had a situation here where even when it wasn't far away, I was my father-in-law who was farther away, and he called me up one day and said he had a hole in his sheets, and could I get him new sheets? Well, of course. And he's an hour and a half away. So I'm already thinking, how do I get to the store? And my head is spinning. Get to the store and get out to Weezer. It was a weekend I wasn't supposed to go. And as I'm thinking, he says, and you know, I really, really like the flannel ones. It was summer and he wanted flannel sheets. And now my head is spinning. And he says, and my favorite color is red. Of course.
Red flannel sheets.
I want to do whatever I can to please him and get him what he wants. And I was having a panic attack until I realized I was walking around with the most amazing shopping app ever. And between that panic attack and my next meeting 3 minutes later, I had red plaid flannel sheets ordered on Amazon, delivered to his house the next day. And he thought I was a magician, right? So there are things you can do from a distance, whether it is that kind of a distance or far away, really thinking about how can that person far away manage bills, banking, all of that can be done remotely now.
Right.
And really leveraging some of these new technologies and capabilities.
Absolutely.
All right, so I'm going to ask another question for you. You'll catch a theme here. We will ask questions. What activities have you asked or could you ask someone far away to help you with? Anything you can think of, we'd like to hear your ideas.
So while ideas are coming in, Darra, one of the things that we did, I had one sister that moved here to help because we had mom and dad, and the other sister lived 350 miles away. And so we gave her all of the big financial things to do that were like selling his house and selling his fifth wheel and selling his truck. And she was all able to do that remotely, but it was something that just took a whole lot of load off of our plate to be able to take care of those other big things where we took care of him, the physical, medical kinds of things real time. So lots of ways to divide it up.
Getting the taxes done, you know, all of those types of things. We've got confirmation of Amazon and ordering groceries. And really, this is just a challenge and an encouragement to think about what could you ask them to do. So think about that and try to think outside of the box, because we've got lots of really cool things that are now available.
Great.
All right, Dee, pick another card.
Okay, let's do a blue one this time.
Three-way calls to help with calls that need to be made. Yes.
Yes. Excellent idea. Actually, and you can get up to about 5 just on 2 cell phone devices.
And here's another good suggestion, dealing with health insurance side of things and health insurance disputes and coordination. Absolutely. Really good suggestion.
Right. Definitely.
All right.
So we're going to play telephone now.
We're going to play telephone now.
So we're going to talk about implementing some winning communication strategies. And this is a super, super, super important one. And if you didn't pick up on that, super important is not only what we're communicating, but how we're communicating makes the world of difference. And so we want to implement some basic communication skills. And those include things listening to understand, not waiting for a break in the conversation so you can say what you want, but to really listen and acknowledge what you're hearing and maybe even reframe it to feed it back to them, what you heard them say they were asking for, or ask for clarification along the way is, I'm not quite sure I understand what you're saying. Could you tell me more? And that's often kind of a source of arguments. Well, I thought you said this. Well, I did, but that was not what my meaning was. And so along that line is to assume positive intent.
Yep.
You know, that if we're going to work through this as a team, we need to give each other benefit of the doubt and assume positive intent. And then to know when it's important to be right and when it's not. And a lot of things we can let go that doesn't have to be right. It doesn't have to be perfect. But things like medications, that's important to be right. That's not a negotiable area. So if there is a conflict there about one person heard versus the other, then that's when you need to bring in your medical professional to get some clarifications. So communication, you bring in others when you need to, and you make sure that you're on the same path. And ultimately you want to avoid anger, fear, and blame because it's not productive. We all have meltdowns. I get that. And fear is, you know, the fear of failing is something that, you know, many of us have suffered with along the way. But to take care of yourself will help you mitigate these kinds of feelings, or just to talk about them versus express them. I'm feeling really angry right now because I'm not getting my needs met and I'm really tired and I know I'm not thinking straight is a whole lot different than yelling at somebody. Yep. And making an accusation. So those feelings are legitimate, but to be able to talk about them versus to act out on them is very key.
Absolutely. So the question for the group out there, what strategies have you used or do you like to use to confirm a shared understanding when you're having a conversation so that you can avoid a game of telephone? Any good tips out there?
So as you're typing those in, I'm going to give you one other hot button of mine, and that is the word why. Why are you doing that? Why didn't you do this? Why is the sun come up in the east? I don't know, it just does. So my sister and I actually have a little game we play that is include, I wonder why. Why did this happen? I wonder. Because we may not know the answer and we don't want the other person to feel put on the spot. And why is one of those questions that makes us naturally go to a defensive place. So try to avoid the use of why questions. Help me understand. Could you give me more information, or not other nice ways to do that?
And there is a good recommendation here. And it's just an acknowledgement that we do learn to read between the lines, and you notice habits and how people frame things. But if there's any question that it's possibly unclear, it's always good, even when you're reading between the lines, to turn it back and say, I think what I'm sensing is, even if it's not direct, right? I'm feeling or I'm sensing that you may need something like this, and to try to get confirmation. But that magical reading between the lines is actually quite the gift of family caregivers.
Well, it is. And part of that is body language. So
Yep.
we are at a bit of a disadvantage when we're not sitting next to each other and can see. But the hearing in someone's voice, the tone in someone's voice is, rather than make accusations. You sound really tired today, Darra. Am I on target with that?
Yes. That's always the response. Well, and it's a good question, how to handle when they get angry when asked for clarification. Do you have a suggestion there, Dee?
So I would probably say something like, I can see this is really upsetting to you. And using pauses and silence can be very helpful in these cases. We often want to keep talking. We want to fill the void with words, and maybe we just need to pause a little bit and let them get out with it. So I'm not quite clear what you're saying. Could you help me? Just forgive me. I'm just not on top of it today. So you can be a little self-effacing and kind of make it about, it's my problem. I just need a little more help from you.
And I was going to go exactly there. It's if you can turn it back to being not a failure of them to communicate, but rather your gap to understand. And depending on the relationship, I want to make sure I understand so I don't disappoint you, or so I don't do the wrong thing. And making sure they understand it's because you want to achieve the common goal, not because you're challenging. Because oftentimes the clarification is interpreted as, I don't agree with you, and I want to challenge you. And so I think, it's very situation specific, Maggie. It's hard. But anything you can do, like Dee said, to be a bit self-effacing and make it about you, if you can.
Great. And I think your point about just being real clear, I don't want to make assumptions. So here's kind of what I was thinking where you were going, and I'm not sure that's right. So you can provide a little bit more information, but definitely de-escalate, kind of take some deep breaths and get centered in your body from a physical standpoint helps. Because what happens when we get in a confrontive kind of environment, we move into what's called the reticular formation of your brain. It's back here in the lower part of your neck and head, and that's primitive brain. And basically we're in fight or flight then, and it's really not very productive. So taking some deep breaths, kind of relaxing, moving out of dinosaur brain and back up into thinking brain helps you continue the conversation.
And it's always okay to say, I think we need to continue this conversation later. If the situation has gotten confrontational or angry, and it's not an emergency situation that you need to make a decision immediately, come back at it and, maybe take a step forward in the task. But remember, it's always okay, like you said, to pause, let there be silence, and even come back at it at another time.
Great. Silence is amazing what comes out of silence.
And I am terrible at it. So it's hard.
It is hard.
All right, Dee, pick a card,
right.
any card.
Okay, we're gonna do red this time. Whoops. Here, I got them.
All right.
Oh, I like this little sleuth guy back here. Oh, it's scavenger hunt.
Scavenger hunt. This is one of my very favorite topics.
Yes, it is.
It is. You want to avoid urgent searches for information and documents. The last thing you want to be dealing with in an emergency is searching for that document that gives you permission to engage with the professionals, gives you permission to act on someone's behalf. And I say this from a very, very personal place. And this is what prompted the start of my business and turning what I was doing and helping people into a business. And the situation we had briefly here was my father-in-law had been ill for years. And we had, I mean, and he knows I say this, we had been on death watch for at least 10 years. He had outlived his life expectancy after a octuple bypass surgery in 2000. He's still alive, by the way. And we had expected him to be the first to go. We had prepared everything. My mother-in-law had all the documents, had everything taken care of. And we got blinded by our expectation bias because she was in control. She had it all and she was in good health, and relatively good health. And she caught the flu and died 5 days later. And my husband and I spent the last 3 days of her life, more of the last 3 days of her life than we wanted to, scrounging to find her healthcare power of attorney, scrambling to figure out how to make sure the bills were paid, and that my father-in-law, who had never done any of those things ever and really had kind of completely backed away, were taken care of. And we spent time, precious time, searching for information and documents to make sure that we could mitigate a crisis for her healthcare and a crisis for his ongoing living situation.
Great.
So with that in mind, here's my project for you. Gather and organize information and documents. And you want to think beyond the medical and the healthcare power of attorney, the basic personal information. Do you have a copy of a social security card, the driver's license? Is there a passport? Where those kind of core personal documents.
A DD-214 if they're in the service.
Absolutely. If they are a veteran, you need a copy of the DD-214. Their household information. I'm telling you, in a crisis, the last thing you want to try to figure out is what day is trash day. right? I mean, this is what puts caregivers over the edge. I speak from experience.
Truly,
So,
truly.
you want personal, household, obviously medical. What are those medications? Do you know what the medications are and the dosages and the prescribing doctor and the purpose of the medication? The financial information, bank accounts. Do you know where the banking information is? Do you know what insurances they have? I will acknowledge that in that phase of my life before I became a professional certified senior advisor, I didn't know the first thing about Medicare. And when I was asked to make decisions on behalf of my mother-in-law when she couldn't, I made a very sound decision from a commercial healthcare point of view. And I zigged when I should have zagged, and it cost us $2,500.
Oh, wow.
Because Medicare works differently than private commercial insurance. So making sure, going through this practice and task of gathering the information and documents and asking all kinds of questions. How does this policy work? What is covered? You're going to learn all kinds of things, including possibly coverage for things that you might have otherwise overlooked. So it's really an important time. The one thing I will acknowledge is when you start poking, if you're a child and poking with your parents in their information, this is very threatening. And they will say, what, you don't think I can take care of myself? So here's my tip for the day. And my tip here is, this is something we should all be sharing with our care companions. And your parents, candidly, should have some of this access to this basic information for you as well, because none of us are guaranteed a tomorrow. And we could have an accident or an emergent situation where our parent would want to help and not be able to. And so making it, and you don't have to open the kimono and share everything, but beginning to share information back and forth is far less threatening than I need to take care of you because you can't take care of yourself. Instead, it becomes, as a family, we should know some of this information so we can take care of each other. And making sure you're sharing it with your care companions and then updating it regularly.
And there are people that just don't want it shared within the family, and that's fine too. And that's when you bring in some other professionals, like Darra, like care managers. There are folks out there that do this kind of work and do the assessments and can help them through the process. So if in fact they just absolutely say no, then bring in a professional, because you know, the professional might not know anything more than you, but they're not your adult child.
Well, and the other thing that that professional can do is give you confidence that here is the information that is being gathered, and there can be an agreement where it's going to be stored, and you can have information of how to access it at a crisis or time of need. But I have worked with clients, and this is what I do. I go in and I get it all in order. And I have some clients who are absolutely 100% open kimono and tell me they want everything shared with their family. And I have others where they say not until I'm gone, and then they know where it is and how to access it. And it's entirely possible either way.
Right. But at least you have it all together.
Yes.
Someplace. So you don't spend the 6 months that I did trying to sort through my father's financial situation. I knew where it was all at. I just had no idea what it was going to take to put it together. And I literally had to take 6 months off of work just to get through his assets and what went where. And it was a dumbfounding and an amazing project that I hope never to put anybody else through.
And this is one of those things, when you get started, you'll be very surprised at just how much there really is. So that's the other thing I tell my clients. Acknowledge where you are today, and any progress you make is better than where you are. Right. Don't give yourself unreasonable expectations, and set little goals and just take it one little bite at a time. And prioritize what's most critical. If you are having a healthcare crisis, if you have healthcare issues, focus there, start there, and make sure that those medical needs are met. If you're worried about the condition of a household and things being managed, prioritize based on the needs of the family.
Right. Keep it up to date. It would be the other one. And so how do you keep track of and share personal family information within your family system?
Who's using notebooks, paper? the ostrich strategy. That's a common strategy,
Yes,
actually.
the ostrich one. We had used OneDrive in the past and giving, each
Mhm.
other access to folders and documents that are password protected.
Some people have notebooks, and there are tools available now. And there are some online tools, there's some electronic tools that are not web-based, including one we developed for our business that is available. We really encourage you to just find the solution that works for you. The importance here is just to do something that works for you. And Mary has created a notebook for each of her daughters and a notebook of passwords. Those are all really good topics. The one thing I encourage you is, if you have things in a notebook, make sure that if you're not home, someone else knows how to get to your notebook. I did have a client who had a crisis on vacation, and everything was in a notebook and was well organized and beautiful, but the crisis happened 500 miles away from the notebook.
Mhm.
So make sure that you have some solution for those key elements that is with you.
Yeah, definitely. Don't lock it in the safe and forget to give somebody the password to the
And
safe.
and Mary's working on her My Data Diary. All right, Mary. Okay, next game.
All right, let's come over here. Tug of War. What issues have created oh, that's the question. Don't do that yet, Dee. Okay, tug of war. Prioritize the best interest of the care recipient. So we want to be always keeping them front and center. And so want to make sure that we're making the best choices available for care for the person that we're looking after, and to listen to everybody. Communication just runs through all of these. And so to be sure that we're listening to everybody's input. And I know we get really possessive of our own ideas and suggestions and think that that's the best way to go. And it may be, but sometimes we need to allow others an opportunity to contribute. So we don't want to be pushing back and forth, pulling back and forth. You don't want to present impossible choices to your loved one, which is, black and white. This is a world of shades of gray, quite honestly. And if you're not comfortable living in shades of gray, then this is going to be an extra challenge for you. But try to not make your family member have impossible choices, something that feels like, oh, you love me, but you don't love my sibling,
Or if you make this choice, I'm never going to come see you.
Right.
Or, those types of things make it really impossible for anyone to make any choice, let alone a good choice.
Right. The one I hate the most is the parents promising me, you'll never put me in a nursing home. And I think, well, nursing home, this isn't a nursing home. This is an assisted living. And it's really not a fair promise to ask somebody to make. And it's kind of putting you in a position to make impossible choices.
And that's an impossible choice being asked of the caregiver.
Yeah.
And if you are facing that,
Mhm.
and you have a family member who is asking you to make that promise, I encourage you not to accept that promise, and instead talk about safety and preferences, and making commitments to keep them where they prefer to be, as long as it's safe and manageable. And
they can get their care needs met.
They can get their care needs met. And only when they can't will you need to look for other things. But as Dee mentioned, many of us still have this vision and idea of nursing home that is so outdated. And they're living communities. These are senior living communities with multiple levels of care. And oftentimes it's a fear of the unknown or a belief of what used to be that makes that conversation so hard.
What they imagine, yes. So for my parents, they would say things like that. And my commitment to them was, I promise you, I will always take good care of you. And so I wasn't talking about the where or the how, but that was my commitment to them. And I think that's what we can do. And the other item on here is don't withhold access unless a safety issue. And it gets to be really turbulent. Tumultuous is the word I was going for, but it wasn't coming out of my tongue. with family systems sometimes, and they think that withholding access to a distant family member is the way to keep mom calm. Well, mom might get more upset after their calls, but it's a connection and a relationship that she still has the right to have, unless it becomes a safety issue, unless it really does cause some trauma along the
Or is
line.
abusive in
Is
any way.
abusive, yes. But withholding access actually can be kind of considered an abusive kind of situation anyway, if it's not for somebody's safety and well-being. So
it really is that concept of tug of war. You're going to be faced with all kinds of situations that feel like a tug of war. And I see a note from Lynn, how timely this is, that she's flying out to help in a crisis mode with her mother and already starting to see some of these sibling issues. So hopefully you can take away some of these thoughts, these ideas, and strategies. And I think we have time to get through 3 or 4 more. But the handout has all of the first half of the game. So
right.
We'd love for you to continue.
And use the game, use this video and encourage them to go watch it. Or to take the outline and discuss it with them. And we know these are obstacles. We know these are hot spots. Let's talk about how we can change our dynamic to work well as a team.
And how we can, when they happen, because they will, even if you've talked about them in advance, what is your action plan? How are you going to solve conflict as a care team, which is as much an important choice as anything.
Exactly.
All right, Dee, you want to play another game?
Yep. Yellow one. Okay.
All right.
Would you rather is our game.
Would you rather? All right. This one's really important. Sometimes in this process, you're just not going to like the choices you need to make. And if you're familiar with the would you rather game, it comes up with things like, would you rather paint your house with a child's paintbrush or clip your lawn with a nail clipper? Yeah, not like either. But okay, how do I evaluate 2 choices that neither of which sounds lovely or is aligned with what I really would rather? So when you come down to this, it really comes down to values and preferences for care. Which choice is going to most match your agreed upon values? What does your loved one that you're caring for value the most? Is it a beautiful house or a beautiful lawn? That might help. And what are their preferences for care? And really always putting them in that center of that crossroads to make sure you're really thinking about those choices based on their values and their preferences, not necessarily yours. And that's important too. The other thing is, make sure you've researched your options. And I encourage you to do research beyond what the neighbor said or what you saw on Facebook. And really, those all aren't bad necessarily, but just make sure you get some first-person research done and you've had an opportunity to look at those choices yourself and make that evaluation for yourself. And then once you've made that choice, create a plan and a backup plan, because it may be that choice doesn't work and you've got to go the other way, or you're going to get an equally unflattering rather choice.
Right.
And so acknowledging that you're not always going to have choices. I mean, working with one of our colleagues who, works to help find placements in assisted living communities. You can go look at 5 or 6 communities, and she had a client just this weekend fall in love with one. And when they did the ADL assessment, they determined that they couldn't take that person because they needed a higher level of care that would have taken that facility out of balance. They already had too many high level of care residents. And so you don't always get the choices you want in this caregiving world, but keep those values and preferences front and center.
I know. I didn't know when we moved our dad into assisted living that you could be kicked out of an assisted living, but you can. And then what? And I had plans. So he had dementia. I had the memory care already picked out, and I'd been on the list for almost a year. And his name did come to the top about the time he was asked to leave the community he was in. But there was 3 weeks when I didn't have a place to move him. And so I had to pitch it, and we figured out how to bring him home and hire personal care. But I promise you, having a plan, you must always have plan B and preferably plan C, because you will at times get down to plan D and probably not have it ready, but it will happen to you. So just know things happen.
Things do happen. So what decisions have you faced as a caregiver? Just a question, if there's any out there where you've had only unpleasant choices. We've shared a few of ours, but you might have others as well. And we are going to keep moving, but we'll see if anything comes up on the chat as well. All right, Dee, let's pick another one.
We're going blue over here. Trouble. Oh, the trouble I've seen. So added stress and responsibility can and will impact family relationships and others as well. So we know even the strongest relationships can be tested by caregiving responsibilities. And so just to acknowledge that right up front, that this is stressful, that this is hard. Let's make sure that we always maintain open and honest communication, even if you can't talk about it right now. And we do this, I probably do it a little more than others, is I'm just not able to talk about it right now. Could we please have this conversation? I'm much better in the morning. So let's have the conversation in the morning where I can be fully present and not maybe over emotional. And assume that positive intent again. And seek help if you need it. Sometimes we need a third person or a third party to help mitigate or navigate and negotiate what's going on. So again, there's professionals out there that can help you do that. It could even be, sometimes it's the middle child that does that because they're good mediators with that. So you want to do what you can to maintain your relationships as much as possible. And so what family relationships have been tested by caregiving responsibilities for you?
Well, and I'll share mine. When I'm not proud of it. I learned from it and I would do differently, but I actually didn't have contact with my brother for 2 years as a result of a fissure that came about related to my father's care. And we resolved it before my father passed, but it was a really challenging, unfortunate situation that I would now know how to handle much better and hopefully wouldn't happen again. And I think I'm actually going to take, I picked our next topic.
Okay, well, let's just talk to Maggie here.
So this is what she was asking, what decisions have you faced as a caregiver where you had only unpleasant choices? And Maggie indicated seeing a neurologist when the person who you're caring for believes they couldn't possibly have any dementia and memory issues are just age related. So I cheated and I've pulled a card. And we're going to play taboo.
Gotcha.
And it's important to talk about difficult topics. So Dee, can you talk a little bit about
taboo?
Yes.
So, some of us in the world kind of think that if we talk about dying, we're going to die. And so we avoid that topic at all costs. Well, the truth of the matter is talking about it is not going to make you die. I know by that same thought process, talking about losing weight never takes pounds off my body. So we have to understand that we need to talk about hard things and we need to ask permission often when we're talking about hard things. Would you be willing to talk about this now? And it's like I said, I'm not always good at the end of the day. I prefer hard things in the morning. So I'd like to talk about it, but in the morning, to use tools and resources like games or presentations to help ease the conversation.
Or the neurologist I'm sure that's what Maggie had to do. Right. Sometimes you need to bring in that professional and that expert to help someone understand that their perception is not reality and that you need to start talking about some of these really difficult things.
Yes.
So it's looking for those resources, whether they're games, tools, videos, education sessions, professionals, doctors, asking for the help and looking for the help to find ways to have those difficult conversations.
And speaking of a difficult conversation, I will say that not all doctors are good doctors, and not all doctors do their thorough due diligence to come up to the conclusion that you already are quite sure you know. As I took my father to a gerontologist in his hometown, board certified gerontologist. And she assessed my dad in about 5 minutes and said, oh, he's perfectly safe to live at home alone. Well, she did none of her homework. And in fact, he was under guardianship. So I did get him to the right doctors who did diagnose him with the dementia, the Alzheimer's disease, and the vascular dementia. So while I say we want to use professionals are people too, and they do make mistakes. So sometimes you have to get multiple opinions. But the bottom line is we have to talk about these things. We need to talk about them proactively, preferably. If not, we're in crisis mode. And like one of these, the clear topic, a taboo topic is, what does end of life look like? And as Darra mentioned earlier, you know, end of life is not always at 89 or 95. It can happen at any point in time. So to take the time to have conversations about what people value the most and what is most important to them and what is least important to them, and to have these conversations honestly and periodically. So it's more of a process than an event.
Absolutely.
So,
all right, let's do, maybe we can squeeze in one or two more here.
okay. I know they're fun.
I know.
Well, they're for us. Jeopardy.
All right, so Jeopardy. And I talked a little bit about this one already and shared the story of my mother-in-law, but really avoiding the trap of expectation bias. It is so easy to fall into. You absolutely fully expect one person to be the one that goes first. And instead you're blindsided. And oftentimes if one of the parents perhaps is actually helping with the care of the more frail parent, if that more well parent passes unexpectedly, you really do have a crisis. So this is where having that backup plan is really important. We plan for what we expect to happen, and life really does have a way of throwing the unexpected at us. So make sure you're looking at your issue from multiple sides, develop a plan for what you expect, but play the what if game. And what if this happens? What if that happens? How would we handle the unexpected? And you might have some things out there. We'll just say, what caregiving situations have you been in that might have caught you by surprise? I shared mine.
Well, I shared mine.
Yeah.
The memory care. Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and play one more while we see if anything comes up.
Oh, charades.
We've talked about this one quite a bit.
Yes, because it's a really important one.
So clear and effective communication, really important. You've heard it a lot. It's almost every game, and it's the way to make sure you end the game with your relationships intact.
Yes.
Candid and honest, but kind. I guess I think I need to add that one, because sometimes you can be candid and honest and not be kind about how you deliver it. Clear and complete. And confirm understanding with reflective listening. I think I heard you say this. Can you confirm that? And to make sure you check in and update frequently.
Exactly.
All right, let's go ahead. I think we can get through
You're
some of these.
committed to this. Blind man's bluff. All right. If you don't know about it, it can't hurt me. I know this game well. I win this at this game. That's keeping my head in the sand, and it is not helpful.
And this is another piece, another layer of the neurologist problem, right? It's easy to ignore what you don't want to see.
Exactly. So first of all, to recognize and accept the need for help, and that at some point in time, we really have to come to terms with it. It's just going to get worse if we don't address it. Sometimes the closer you are, the harder it is to see. So that's where family that might be out of town or friends that haven't seen somebody for a long time, see things differently than we do, because well, the old analogy that we use so much is, the pot of hot water. If you're in the water when it's tepid and you're turning up the temperature, you don't notice that you're just about to boiling versus when you just jump into hot water. It's a whole different thing. So use the other people around you to help make sure your perception is accurate, and then examine your justifications and excuses. And it takes insight and time to do that work, but those are the kinds of things that we can do when we step away and we take care of ourselves, is kind of step through some of the stuff that maybe hasn't been going so well and figure out what might be helpful to do differently.
And sometimes examining that justification from the perspective of the care recipient as well. Why are they likely explaining away their forgetfulness, right? Why do they want to believe that it's just old age?
Right.
And there's probably something there rooted in fear. I'm afraid of what is happening to me.
Yeah.
I am afraid of what will happen and change in my current circumstances if that really is happening to me. And blind man's bluff is often born of fear.
Yes, definitely.
All right, we can do it. We have one more.
Family Feud.
Family Feud. So the issue here is you actually may need help to solve some of these family disagreements. And it's not always going to go well. And some relationships may be damaged and some relationships may repair. But when you are in a situation where it has escalated to the point that you've tried these strategies, you've tried the communication and the open, candid, collaborative family approach to caregiving, and you just can't resolve the issue successfully, seek assistance. And there are people to help resolve challenging disputes and help find the next best path forward. And it might be a care manager. Sometimes just bringing in someone who's not in the family to help and give an assessment that is objective, and candidly bring in an outsider. You put a professional in the room and the tone of the conversation changes, because some of the family dynamics, people put they sit up a little straighter and they won't say things the same way with a professional in the room that they might if there isn't one. So sometimes just having that care manager or somebody to come in and help assess and help plan, and care managers do that important family management work. If it's escalated beyond that point of solving a point issue or a point problem, you may need counseling as a family. You may need to bring in a mediator to help you resolve, particularly if you start getting into money issues, responsibility issues, things like that. It can get that far. And ultimately, you sometimes do need to bring in lawyers, and especially if you start into custody-like battles, like
or guardianship
and conservatorship, control of a person. And sometimes that's negative. It can also be very positive. If you have determined that guardianship and conservatorship is appropriate, please consult with a good attorney who specializes in this, and make sure you're set up to be most successful in managing the affairs of someone that you love. And so this is just a reminder, there will be family feuds. Hopefully we've given you some tools to help you better manage them on their own. But if you get to the point where you can't, call in the cavalry.
Absolutely.
All right. So with that, we made it through our games, and want to remind you that finishing the game means that needs are met, relationships are maintained, and you've achieved the best quality of life possible for your care recipient. And with that, we have finished part 1 of our game, and we thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. What questions do you have?
Any questions?
Can take yourself off mute and ask, or you can type it in the chat, either way.
Or comments. Hopefully this was helpful. Thank you for your comment, Lynn. I'm glad that we gave you a few little nuggets for your trip and your conversation. Who is best to go to obtain a dementia diagnosis?
So a gerontologist is really kind of a sweet spot. We don't have many gerontologists in town, and those that we have are not always taking clients. So to keep your eye open for a board certified gerontologist can be helpful. Often an individual's primary care physician or PCP can do a lot for you, especially if it's a long-standing relationship, because they will have seen changes happen over time, especially if we can contain ourselves and let them talk on their own. So PCPs are a great place to start, and they can be very helpful. A gerontologist is another place, and ultimately may need to see a neurologist, because we do, the PCP should be ruling out other things that could be contributing to a perception of diagnosis. There are things that are correctable, blood work, there's a couple of vitamins that can make a difference
Urinary
there.
tract infections.
Urinary tract infection, absolutely. I'm often confused with dementia, but it's the result of the infection. So get things looked at medically first and make sure things are very clear there, that there's not some other medical reason for it. But then third is neurology, who specializes with the brain, and any one of those may refer you to a neuropsychologist for a neuropsych eval, which is a much more pen to paper kind of assessment, and can be helpful at further doing a deeper dive into what the type of dementia might be, or what the type of brain disorder might be. So PCP first, internal medicine, gerontologist, neurologist, neuropsychologist.
There you go. All right, thanks for the comments. I see some people having to drop off. We understand. Good luck to you all. Our information is included in your handouts, and we invite you to reach out to us by email, phone. The nice thing about Learn Education is oftentimes your educators are the ones who answer the phone. So if you have a need or a question that you would like answered, or some guidance, please do reach out to us, and we will be happy to help you or guide you.
Absolutely. Always. We love what we do. We are passionate for making sure that people have the information to be able to provide good care, and that to have the support that they need.
I do want to just pass here. I'll thank you. You can thank me, but okay. I do want to thank again. And actually, I love doing this, so this is fun.
Yeah, no,
we don't really need to be thanked.
Nor do we like each other too much.
But I do want to thank, again, Oasis Senior Advisors and Red Pheasant Realty for sponsoring for us here this session. And we are so grateful that we have sponsors in the community are making it possible for us to bring this to you free of charge. And all attendees from today's session will receive an email inviting you to join our mailing list. We ask you to confirm that subscription to receive information. We won't join the mailing list automatically. So we ask you to confirm that subscription if you're interested in receiving emails about monthly with either new videos, new topics, or announcement of our new season. We want to make sure that people know about what education opportunities are available. And our final 4 sessions in our fall season are coming up in November and early December. We avoid the holidays, but we've got Dealing with Downsizing, where we have a senior real estate specialist who's going to come in and talk about both the emotional and physical, like the actual work of downsizing someone's home. Home for the Holidays, Dee is the educator for that one as well. And this is an important one. What should you look for when you go visit a family member that you haven't seen for a long time? What are the warning signs, and what might you want to do to make sure that that loved one who lives alone far away is safe? Transitioning to care, we have a care manager and a placement specialist who will be coming in and talking about how you begin to think about transitioning from home into a care situation, how you manage that, and how you choose the type of care and the medical needs in particular in that case. And we end the year with mindfulness, which we think is valuable for everyone.
Yes, it is. And I can't believe we're talking about November and December already. It's just, this year has flown by faster than most, I think. So we thank you so very much for joining us today. If you found this informative and helpful, please share the information with your friends and colleagues about Learn. We'd like to widen our circle and be able to affect and help as many people as we can. And we're so appreciative for you and you're spending the time with us today. So thank you very much, Darra.
Thank you, Dee, and thank you all for being here today.
Bye-bye.